pages long. I've actually read almost the whole thing. To be honest, there's a few pages I skipped, a little boring history lessons. Tragedy and Hope. It's back in print. Believe me, he's dead. He's not glad it's back in print because they didn't want the public reading this. Available at Infowars.com. Discounted. It gets a free citizen rule book with every order. And back in print because they sold out all the ones that were printed back in the 70s. None Dare Call It Conspiracy, the book that crystallized my awakening at about 13 years old when a couple of these were on the bookshelf because one of my dad's John Birch Society buddies was always bringing them by. And I pulled it off the shelf and read it. And I'd already read so much history. I was kind of a bookworm slash jock. But the point is that it all made sense. And that's what created much of who Alex Jones is today. It's back in print, a new, lovely little edition, $14 at Infowars.com today or Infowarshop.com or call 888-253-3139, 888-253-3139. You can also write to us at P.O. Box 19549, Austin, Texas, 78760. Let's play a minute or so of Ron Paul talking about tragedy and hope and what Carol Quigley said about the lesser of two evils and how the system tries to control the left and the right. And then we'll get the take on that from iconic libertarian and I guess anarcho-capitalist, you could call him, Lew Rockwell, here in just a moment. But here's Ron Paul from his concession speech or what have you, talking about would he join a third party back in 2008. He didn't endorse John McCain. Here it is.
You know, quite a few years ago, when I think it was when Bill Clinton was inaugurated, it was one of his speeches, he recognized one single individual as being very important to him philosophically. And that was a bit of surprise because I knew about the individual, and some of you may know about him, but it's worth looking into. And his name was Carol Quigley. He wrote the book Tragedy and Hope. Now, the important part of Tragedy and Hope and Carol Quigley is that he claims that he was on the inside and part of the group that, you know, did the planning. But why did he write Tragedy and Hope? To expose these people behind the scenes? Because he believed they were far enough advanced, it didn't have to be secret, they could be out in the open, and this is the way it works. It's a tragedy if you don't accept this, and there's hope if you know who runs the show. That's my interpretation, but I believe it's correct. But let me read a quote from him, and thinking about where he's coming from. He says the argument that the two parties should represent opposed ideals and policies, one perhaps the right and the other of the left, is a foolish idea acceptable only to the doctrinaire and academic thinkers. Instead, the two parties should be almost identical so that the American people can throw the rascals out at any election without leading to any profound or extensive shift in policy. I mean, I think that is profound statement because it tells us what's going on and why things don't change.
All right, so there you go. Lew Rockwell
here today.
Again, your take on what Ron Paul said 4 years ago. I mean, that says it all. And what's your view on this whole global corporate monopoly men system?
Of course, Carol Quigley was exactly right, very influential professor at Georgetown University for many years. And as Ron mentioned, Clinton cited him and thanked him in his acceptance speech at the Democratic Convention. But it's absolutely true, and we just have to look at the two parties. The two parties are identical. As Butler Schaefer says, two wings of the same bird of prey. They're both part of the government. That's why they can't be taken over, by the way. It's not any more possible to take over the Republican Party than you can take over the Department of Justice. And they're evil. They're part of the government. But yes, they're both set up to be slightly different rhetorically, but in policies, be exactly the same. Mitt Romney is a Goldman Sachs guy. Barack Obama is a Goldman Sachs guy. Barack Obama's for all these wars. Mitt Romney's for all these wars. They're both for the police state and so forth. So this is why we have a two-party system. It's why they don't want multiple parties, and it's why there's no, except in style, there's no difference. This is not an accident. It's deliberate. It's why they love democracy. One of the many reasons they love democracy has been a great thing for the growth of the state. Everybody thinks Hans Hoppe's great book, democracy, The God That Failed, is the key guide to why democracy, as it's developed, is just an instrument for the state to use against the rest of us. And Quigley, of course, is very important to read. I'm so glad you're bringing Gary Allen's book back into print. Gary Allen was a very great man, great writer, and this is a wonderful book, Alex. So these are all things worth reading. And as usual, as you point out in this YouTube from Ron, he's always worth listening to. That's true today. It was true 30 or 40 years ago. It was true when he first got into public life in reaction to Richard Nixon's closing of the gold window and imposing price and wage controls on the economy in 1971. He's the same guy, and he's a sure guide to all this sort of thing. And look him up on YouTube. Of all these, he's got many YouTubes from all his earlier campaigns, from his congressional speeches. They're all worth listening to. And he's just but again, don't expect anybody else to be Ron Paul. There's only been one Ron Paul, and I would say that even though I support Ron Paul in all his, in everything he does in terms of his political races, politics is a snare and a delusion. I mean, there's only one Ron Paul. Maybe there will be somebody else in the future. We can't rule it out. But there's only one of these guys in 200 years, so they don't come along very often. And we should appreciate what we've got. We should support him, read him. Author of many important books. He's also a great intellectual. I mean, this again separates him. He's a reader. Separates him from the people in politics who aren't readers, who aren't intellectuals.
Oh, I got to tell you, I've interviewed
Ron.
Ron.
Tells him to do.
I mean, I've interviewed Ron more than 150 times or so. It might even be 200 if you count out on the road, my crew asking him questions, and my reporters probably more than 200. You can ask him something that just broke that day that's pretty obscure, and he knows about it. I don't think I've ever brought anything up to him that he didn't already know about, and then he'll know about stuff I don't know about. I mean, he's just such a voracious researcher. It's like even in that piece where the Sacha Baron Cohen tries to corner him in there in the room, Ron Paul's sitting there reading the newspaper. I mean, I guess that's all he's doing is researching.
He reads all the time. He's got a huge personal library. He's read it all. I mean, he's read our enemies. He's read all the good guys. It's why he's actual. He doesn't. He's a medical doctor, but he might as well be an Austrian economist too. He's read everything. He's read thoroughly in history and in political philosophy and many different areas, investments and so forth. I mean, he really is a Renaissance man, and he's so different from the other people in the Congress. I mean, you can't. He stands out like a healthy thumb, not a sore thumb, among all those boobs and creeps and crooks and morons and criminals that compose the U.S. government. I mean, he really is. And he's the minister in the whorehouse or something. I mean, he's so different, so different from the rest of them. And so there's just one Ron.
Lew, I want to shift gears into a bunch of subjects and also ask you what's number one on your plate, your radar right now. But, I get this from people who are on the left. They understand the corruption of government, but they always think they can fix it. They talk about the American system, but you go research it. A lot of that government involvement is actually what ends up causing the Civil War. If you actually go back and look at some of the people that were involved in it, I mean, it just asks for it. The bigger the government, the worse the society. And then I see the criticism, Ron Paul wants you to be high. He wants you to be on drugs because of drug decriminalization. But every drug dealer I've seen interviewed says don't ever legalize them because that would drive down the price probably 500 to 1,000%. I mean, this is 2-year-old level information to understand. And Republicans attack him and say he wants you to be on drugs. Democrats attack him. But you see the American people. I mean, even Pat Robertson says decriminalize marijuana now. I mean, it really seems that people are starting to get it, and that some of the European countries, as you know, that have decriminalized it have seen more than 50% reductions in drug use. It takes the money. It takes the glamour out of it. It takes the poisonous stuff that gets mixed with the street garbage. Look at alcohol, tripled in use, corruption bloomed during 9 years of prohibition. I mean, isn't this an idea whose time has come? And what do you see the critics doing, trying to demonize Ron Paul, yourself, myself, and others that want decriminalization?
Well, of course, the demonization is the word. And, if there's anybody should be able to tell about Ron Paul, he's Mr. Straight. I mean, he doesn't use drugs. It's he only started to have an occasional glass of wine when he was no longer in medical practice. I mean, this guy is so straight and so normal and so regular and so principled. He's never used drugs. In fact, he's done a lot of work in his medical career to try to help people get off drugs if they want to. But he understands that, first of all, as Mises pointed out, we have the right to decide what we put in our bodies. This is not somebody else's decision to make. We as adults have this right. And we know that a lot of stuff that the government promotes as wonderful for us, high fructose corn syrup, and go right down the list of all the horrible things that they promote, are actually very bad for us. Probably far worse than smoking a marijuana cigarette. And things like marijuana are actually very good for many medical conditions. But that, again, people, as a matter of the control of their own bodies, control of their own lives, have the right to do what they want to do. But, of course, the government, we always have to remember the government is never, I don't want to shock anybody, the government's not a charitable organization. The government doesn't actually care about you. They want your money and they want power over you. So this is why they want the drug war. They also make vast amounts from all the bribes they get from the drug dealers. But I think more and more Americans are realizing, especially on the medicinal marijuana question, but on many other related issues, that they don't want the government running this. It's made things far worse. Look at, they're destroying Mexico right now with the Bush enforced drug war and Obama enforced drug war in Mexico. 50,000 people dead, the whole country being wrecked. Our country has been largely wrecked. And, of course, it doesn't keep drugs out. The people who love the drug war will say, well, what, you want to have drugs? They can't keep drugs out of the federal prisons, let alone excuse me, let alone out of any other place.
Well, exactly. So, I mean, they're the ones...
They promote drugs use. They promote drug use.
Yeah, they're the ones making it more valuable than gold. I mean, it's just a no-brainer. You decriminalize it, takes the money out of it, and crime rates just absolutely plunge. Expanding on this, Lew, has it ever been more obvious that government is gearing up for war with the people? I want to get your take on admitted re-education camps. The Army admitted the document we got a month ago was accurate. They said it's classified. We get in trouble. We're bad to have it. They're admitting that torture. Obama says he'll kill whoever he wants. They're announcing local police to have the Army. The Secretary of the Army has put out a new CFR report saying we want to have Army to respond as SWAT teams in every town, regular Army. We're seeing 30,000 armed drones. We're seeing the head of the CIA come out 2 months ago and say, yes, all the new tech has back doors. We're watching and listening to you without warrants. I mean, it's even blowing me away just how criminal. It's like they're going crazy. Is this an attempt to intimidate us because they know we're waking up, or is this just an orgy of control freaks that think they're unstoppable? I want your expert opinion on that, Lew Rockwell.
Well, I think they are, they are control freaks, of course. Everybody who goes into government, especially the people who rise in government, are like this. They like hurting people. They like controlling people, and they want, of course, our money. But they have what St. Augustine called the lust for power, the libido dominandi. They want to rule others. They lust to rule others. They lust to kill. These are bad people. These are not like your next door neighbor. People in government are bad people. But unfortunately, let me point out, every government would like to be a totalitarian government if they could get away with it. It's only the people's opposition